Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1050 just came out, and this is another chapter where we do have to talk about the raid failing stuff at the very beginning, simply because there's no real way to avoid it, and most of you are probably here to hear my thoughts on that. So, sorry to disappoint, but nothing has changed for me after this chapter. Not because I don't believe that it's possible for the raid to succeed, just because I said that 1051 is the chapter that I'm looking out for. And I made this very clear in my last chapter review and in my last video that I fully expected 1050 to very likely be a sort of breather chapter where the heroes get to experience some sense of triumph or victory before things potentially flipping on their heads at the end of 1051. And I also made clear that the end of 1051, if nothing has picked back up, if it's clear that Kaido's not getting back up, if there's no flashback picking back up or anything like that, then at that point, I will stop saying that the raid is going to fail. I will say that the raid succeeded, and I'm still going to internally hope going beyond that, but most likely that's the last you'll hear me say it in a video unless something changes. So, 1051, as stated previously, that's the chapter we're waiting on. 1050 is nothing crazy or unexpected. This is, as I said in previous videos, what I would expect to happen. So, that aside, any sort of glaring red flags that came out of this chapter that suggest to me that things are not yet done? Well, first of all, is Momonosuke saying that he is not going to open the borders of Wano country. To me, that is pretty major, simply because this entire agenda to take down Kaido, etc., really began with that mantra, with that initiative. If you go back to Zou, when Kinemon and the Scabbards are basically explaining to Luffy what their primary goal is with Wano and what directive Odin left them with, they all basically say in unison, open the borders of Wano country. So that was the main primary glaring goal that we began this whole storyline with, right? And then as you progress through Wano, we see certain things. We see the bad guys in school teaching the kids that, hey, isolationism good, opening the border is bad. This is really, really bad. We should stay isolated. And then on the flip side, at the end of Act 2, the climax of Act 2, you have Luffy giving a big speech about why having outsiders come in and help you is a good thing. So the mantra has very much been isolationism bad, opening the borders good throughout the course of this arc and preceding arcs like Zou, etc. So for Momonosuke to land on this, it actually seems to me like he's a little bit hesitant and still timid and maybe a little in fear based on the battle that he just experienced with Kaido and Big Mom, and he doesn't want to open the borders yet, although obviously it is too early to figure out exactly what his motivation is. But if you go back and look throughout Momonosuke's panels, etc., for the last, 20 or so chapters, it's been a lot of scared faces and a lot of oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. So I do think that Momo is coming from a place of essentially fear, worry about what will happen if he opens the borders. So the fact that he is not yet ready to do that suggests to me that there is still more to go and that we have not yet reached the right conclusion necessarily for this arc. That is one small thing. The other small thing is that Kaido and Big Mom are just down in the hole in lava, it looks like. So they're just getting burned. I don't... That's the big question mark, which is, do they die here? Because I think a lot of people don't necessarily think that they die to this just because of the way that Kaido and Big Mom have been built up, being very, very well renowned for their durability and basically being impervious to 99% of different types of damage, right? I think unless you're Akainu, you're probably not going to be damaging them with lava, but maybe I'm wrong. So maybe they do just die here, but it doesn't seem likely to me. Again, I'm biased, but that doesn't seem likely to me. So in that case, it does seem a little odd to me that they're in a place right now where no one from the Marines can come pick them up, as we usually see at the end of arcs, that once you take down the big bad guy, it's the Marines who are going to come in and actually haul them away for good. So they can't actually be taken away. The people of Wano can't go down there and really capture them. So right now they are in basically a location that is, from my point of view, very conveniently situated where they can be technically viewed as, yes, defeated, but at the same time, unless they never wake up again, the only way out for them is basically to go back up. So that does suggest to me that at some point, hopefully soon, Kaido and Big Mom come back up to the surface, right? I'm hoping next chapter, but again, wait and see. It's mostly just, I don't really know how their fate kind of ends there, unless they literally die there, which I also just don't think is going to happen. But we'll find out about that when the time comes. So, that aside, those are the two things that kind of stuck out to me this chapter that suggests that it's not really over. Aside from that, looking at the chapter as a whole, and I'm going to look at this chapter through the lens that this is, let's say, the end of the arc, right? Let's say that this is the end of the arc and this is the celebration chapter. For me personally, And I actually did go back and reread other chapters from like similar parallel chapters. So basically from Dressrosa, chapter 791, from Alabasta, I think it was chapter 210 or 211, and from Skypiea. So similar chapters of basically saving the nation, and the follow-up chapter where everybody's enjoying that sense of victory. I personally feel, and I encourage you to go back and read those chapters. I encourage you to go back and read those chapters so that you don't just come at me and say that, hey, you're underwhelmed because blah, blah, blah. I personally encourage you to go back and read those chapters. Maybe start with Dressrosa, chapter 791. I personally felt that there was a greater rush of emotion reading those chapters, partly because there was more emotion displayed from the characters in those chapters themselves. So there are generally a lot more tears, a lot bigger reactions from the characters basically coming out of those chapters. So reading this chapter, we did get the standard, like, Luffy won and everybody's like pumping their fist and cheering. I'm just saying that there's certain aspects, for example, look at Yamato holding Luffy here. If you look at Dressrosa, it was Rebecca holding Luffy and she's crying, tears are flowing, tears are streaming down onto Luffy's face, and just generally Kiros, everybody, there's just a larger display of emotion and release from previous chapters like this, at least as far as from my perspective, going back and rereading those chapters. So for me, even in the context that this might be the end of the arc, I personally did not love this chapter quite as much as those other chapters. However, maybe this is something that plays out over multiple chapters. So maybe next chapter, when we are seeing, like Kinemon's wife, Otsuru, reuniting with him, when we finally get Hiyori reuniting with Momonosuke, although it seems like she did fly over on Momonosuke, but maybe like their first personal interaction. Maybe once certain characters start interacting with other characters and everything like that, then maybe we get a greater rush of emotion from those interactions and maybe bigger reactions out of those characters, basically. So hopefully that happens. That's the one side that I guess I felt a little bit underwhelmed on, but on the flip side, I actually really liked the Toko and Yasue section of this chapter. So the Toko and Yasue section of this chapter I thought was really good, partly because Yasue to me was the most emotional part of the entire Wano arc. I thought Oden boiling was really cool, but in a more of like an epic, awe-inspiring sort of way, right, in terms of how honorable and everything like that what he's been doing is. Whereas Yasue's death it felt more of a tragedy that did make me teary-eyed and everything like that. So Yasue's death, I think, was probably the one and really only emotional point of this whole arc for me. So I think getting the reference back to Yasue and what he did and the type of person that he chose to become, even though he was once a daimyo, the type of person that he chose to become and why he chose to take on that persona, I thought that revisiting that was really, really good and sort of bittersweet at this moment in time. And I like Toko changing the lantern to "Thank you, Daddy," because, I don't know, it's the better send-off to, like, not her still pining for Yasue to come back, but her recognizing what her father did and actually being very happy that he did that, which is what he would have wanted. So, I don't know, that was a really touching part of the chapter to me, at least. I think the rest of it, still a little confused basically how all the 9 scabbards got back together so quickly, because or I don't even know if it's going to be all 9, because last we saw Nekomamushi, he was in Onigashima, right, announcing to everybody, but and Ashura Doji, he just went completely missing for a little bit when it seemed as though he died. So I don't know if it's going to be all 9 scabbards that we really see. I didn't actually take the time to count the silhouettes, so maybe it is all 9, but it does look like all the scabbards are basically going to be like, hey, we're back, and Hiyori's going to be like, hey, I'm actually Hiyori, I'm not the courtesan, etc. And Momonosuke is going to look like Oden, so there's not going to be much question that he is Oden's son, I don't think. I am a little surprised, basically, again, as I said, that all the 9 scabbards were able to gather so quickly, and also just that the Hiyori Momonosuke thing is a little confusing to me, because that was one of the long-awaited reunions, I think, from early on in the arc, right? So going back to Act 2, Momonosuke talking about, like, no, we have to wait till the battle is over before I can meet my sister again, right? So it did feel as though that was something, and Hiyori, even when she gave Zoro Enma back, she refused to go meet with the rest of the Alliance because she didn't, I think some quote about, like, don't want to pour cold water on, some warrior's flames, something along those lines, right? So it is a little surprising to me that we got Hiyori kind of just, her reunion with Momonosuke kind of just already happened. Maybe Oda, like, next chapter, he gives us a little flashback of thinking of him as Oden already. Momonosuke and Hiyori basically meeting back up, because Oda does sometimes do things like that, like, oh yeah, this is what happened when they actually interacted for the first time. It is a little, but like at the same time, if she just got on Momonosuke without them acknowledging any sort of interaction or anything, that'd be kind of odd. So hopefully we get some flashbacks or some explanation of their reunion next chapter, because that is actually something that I was looking forward to, because it is kind of a bizarre situation. Like, Momonosuke left for the future, did successfully accomplish his mission, it seems like, bringing back all these allies, helping freeing Wano and everything like that, whereas his little sister had to grow up in Wano and go through all the suffering, and now she's like a grown woman, and he's still like a child, but he's also now got the body of a grown man. So I don't know, it's just a little weird, basically, in that, like, she's lived a full life while he's still basically the same age as when she knew him. So, I don't know. I think that dynamic is going to be kind of interesting to see, because basically she's, like, his big sister now. I don't think that Momonosuke is necessarily going to have the maturity or anything like that of an adult. I don't think that's anything that we've seen really out of him so far. I think it's safe to say that he still is very much an 8-year-old. So I do think the next chapter might be very also Momonosuke focused, just because Oda held off on the reveal of what he looks like just now, and this is probably going to be about to be his big moment of basically being like, hey, I'm the shogun of this country now, I've come back to, you know, take care of this land, etc. So hopefully we get a really good Momonosuke scene next chapter. Again, I personally did not feel like him with the flame clouds holding up Onigashima. It was literally just like 3 really small panels, basically, after a long while of build-up for him to that moment. So I'm a fan of Momonosuke. I'm still hoping that we get some really good character moments for him out of all of this by the end. So that's all for this video. We wait for 1051. Watch out for my video next week. I'm going to be talking about how great the Kaido fight was in comparison to other fights, assuming that this is the finale. So look out for that, and you can get my extended thoughts on this and all future topics on Patreon. Link in the description below. Talk to you all later.